Morning, critical thinkers. We are live. Morning, morning, morning. Hopefully, all is well. When you have a moment, do me a quick favor. Please hit the like button to help with the algorithm. And if you can, please indicate the city and state where you're viewing from. Appreciate you coming. So, just a couple of quick thoughts before we get into the topic. I see my role as trying to give people information, digging deeper than what the mainstream media is showing them and telling them, right? So, but I have to be honest, I am sick and tired of covering this damn correction officer strike. I'm just annoyed. I hate the fact that 85 to 90%, 85 to 95% of what's being covered in the media now is only about the strike, and it's not about the atrocities occurring with incarcerated individuals in the New York State prison system. So it really bothers me that all the media attention is going to the striking correctional officers, and a tiny percentage is going to what's occurring for those who are incarcerated, the beatings, the murders, the cover-ups. It really irks me. I'm hoping that this is gonna be the last time that I'm covering this correction officer strike. By the way, Julianne Reyes, thank you for coming in. She's from Morristown, Tennessee. Morristown, Tennessee. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So again, I hope this is the last time that I talk about this strike. I do extend an invitation for any correction officer out there. If you want to come on and have a dialogue, have a conversation with me, I promise that I will be honest. I promise that I will give you a fair share to talk about your experience. And if you want to be anonymous, come on anonymously. I'm willing to allow that as well, because I do want to get another perspective on what's occurring within the New York State DOCCS system. So today we have two things. The first thing I'm going to do is give you a little bit of an appetizer. I'm going to be going over a very brief article talking about the agreement reached uh, between New York State DOCCS, NYSCOPBA, the state of New York. So that article is very brief. And then what we will do is go deep into the 5-page Memorandum of Understanding to go over what that agreement is. Now, one thing to understand, myself, along with other YouTubers, have said before the strike is over. Um, we basically went with the information that we had. Okay. You also have to understand this is that in order for this agreement, this 5-page memorandum to go into effect, 85% of the workforce has to sign it, okay? And 85% of the workforce has to report to work today at 6:45 a.m. So those two criteria have to be met in order for this agreement to be fully put in place. So that's just something else to understand. As, as of right now, it's 6:19 p.m., 6:45 a.m. We will know whether that threshold of 85% of correctional officers returning to work, whether that's been met or not. So let's go into the appetizer, and I'm going to present to you an article. Again, this is brief, and then we'll go into the 5-page memorandum of understanding. Okay, so here we go. This is the article, and this is from NBC5. Agreement reached between DOCCS and NYSCOPBA workers could return Monday. And the anchor reporter is Alexis Crandall. New York State, an agreement has been reached that could end the weeks of prison strikes across New York State, including in the North Country. Correction officers could be back to work as early as Monday. The New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision confirmed the agreement Saturday night. They say it will take effect if at least 85% of all staff members return to work on Monday. So again, this will be in effect if 85% of staff members return to work today. This deal comes after weeks of staff strikes across New York, state prisons calling for safer working conditions under the HALT Act, a measure that aimed to limit the use of solitary confinement in state prisons. I'm going to pause this for a quick second. One thing that people need to understand is that these correctional officers who were striking, they had specific demands. Suspending the HALT Act permanently was what they really wanted. In addition, you had correction officers that were striking, that were asking for not having to use body cams. I just want you to just, again, think about that. They were asking not to wear body cams. In addition, they also had demands of for contactless visits between incarcerated individuals and their family members. So they were asking for visits that would occur with individuals incarcerated and their families be through a plexiglass window and not face to face. So just ponder that for a second and understand the impact if that goes into effect, if that were to go into effect, what that would have on incarcerated individuals. I'm going to go back to the article now. Under this agreement, which was signed by DOCCS, the New York State Office of Employee Relations, and the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association, commonly known as NYSCOPBA, employees won't be penalized if they've been on strike as long as they go back to work on Monday. I'm going to pause it here. So again, you have correctional officers who violated the law, who violated the Taylor Act. They striked. These consequences can be felt throughout the prisons throughout New York State. I believe as of now, it's closer to 8 incarcerated individuals who have lost their lives, may have been indirectly caused by the strike. And now these correction officers don't face consequences for those that engaged in the strike. Why am I not surprised with this? I'm really not surprised. I didn't see these officers, suffering any consequences as a result of their actions. So that's disappointing to see. But let's continue on with the article. Employees who return to work on March 10th will have their health insurance reinstated. So for those of you who don't know, DOCCS they started to terminate health insurance coverage for those striking officers. Continuing with the article. Additionally, some elements of the HALT Act will be suspended for 90 days so a HALT committee can address safety concerns. A full copy of the agreement can be found here. And the agreement is what we're going to be going over next. So again, that article was just a little appetizer. What I'm going to do next is go over the 5-page Memorandum of Understanding. This is going to be a deep dive. This is not a superficial, let's take a look at this. We're going to be going over this deeply. And my goal with this is that you have an educated understanding of this agreement so that when you're having conversations, you can speak about this intelligently. So let me go ahead and share the article with everyone. This is the Memorandum of Agreement between New York State of New York and the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association, Inc., known as NYSCOPBA. Whereas numerous correction officers and correction sergeants of the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision have been engaged in an illegal and unauthorized strike, and whereas the state and NYSCOPBA affirm the importance of ending the illegal strike and engaging in a good faith dialogue to address the concerns of the union and its members, and Now, therefore, the parties enter into the Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, including a process for enforceability of this MOA that will govern the end of the illegal strike and address the concerns regarding employee safety and quality of working life inside DOCCS. So just a fair warning, this document is really about um, correction officer safety. There is mention of safety of incarcerated individuals, but this doesn't really address safety for incarcerated individuals. Let's just get that out the way. This is solely to the benefit of correction officers, and from what I've read so far, it's really to the detriment of incarcerated individuals. Let's go back to the memorandum of understanding. So the first provision here, which is what correction officers say is the main reason why they've been protesting, so not protesting, striking, is the HALT Act. So let's get into it. The commissioner of DOCCS will exercise his existing discretion under the HALT Act and continue the temporary suspension of the programming elements of the HALT Act for 90 days from the date of the MOA due to the ongoing emergency and exigent circumstances that exist within each facility due to the illegal strike and the significant staffing deficit that existed prior to the illegal strike. After 30 days from the date of the MOA, the Commissioner of DOCCS will begin to evaluate the operations, safety, and security of our facilities relative to staffing levels and determine whether reinstituting the suspended elements of HALT would create an unreasonable risk to the safety and security of the incarcerated individuals and staff. Let me just stop that there real quick. I just want to go over a couple of quick points. um, so the HALT Act is, or elements of the HALT Act is being suspended for 90 days from the date of this MOA. This was signed on Saturday, March 8th. So add 90 days, and that's how long the suspension of elements of the HALT Act will be in place. And then this is also saying after 30 days from the date of the MOA, the Commissioner of DOCCS will begin to evaluate the operation, safety, and security of our facilities relative to staffing levels and determine whether reinstituting the suspended elements of HALT would create an unreasonable risk to the safety and security of the incarcerated individuals and staff. So basically, what this is saying next is that Daniel Marchicello will assess um, whether whether instituting the suspended elements, whether that is going to be a security risk to staff members and incarcerated individuals. So let's go on. Let's continue on with the memorandum. This analysis will be done on a facility by facility basis and will be ongoing. The suspension applies only to the HALT Act provisions contained within Correctional Law Section 137, pursuant to which the Commissioner has operational discretion, and specifically to the provisions that have been directly impacted by the staffing crisis and illegal strike, and not to the other elements of the HALT Act. DOCCS will continue to follow all other elements of the HALT Act requirements. So basically, this is saying that this only pertains to a specific section of the HALT Act contained within correction law, and it gives you the section. So let's jump into the circuit breaker staffing metric. So I had to do my own research on what specifically was meant by this. Hopefully this breakdown here will give you a good understanding of what it means. But just think about when the power goes out and you hit the circuit breaker to bring the power back on. The circuit breaker staffing metric analysis shall be used upon the conclusion of the suspension of the HALT related programming discussed above. On high impact days defined as Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which is typically when we have less staff available DOCCS will deploy the circuit breaker staffing metric that will be used to determine if a facility-wide emergency exists based on exigent and emergency circumstances associated with inadequate staffing levels that would create a significant and unreasonable risk to the incarcerated staff or facility. So high impact days, days in which typically you have less staff, they define it here as Friday, Saturday, on and Sunday, right? And so they're using this circuit breaker staffing metric to determine whether they have a crisis on their hands. So let's dig deeper and go more into what this means. We hear in this paragraph, the circuit breaker staffing metric on high impact days will consider the net staffing levels to include budget fill level, plot plan, absences, and voluntary overtime. If the staffing vacancies are at or above 30% of the plot plan, the following action will be taken to avoid the 24-hour mandatory overtime. Just one thing, pause. Just one thing to consider briefly is that you have correctional officers doing, 24 hours straight. They were complaining about the fatigue. Now that's one thing I can't agree with. I don't think any individual should be working 24 hours straight. Just the impact on the body, your ability to focus and concentrate is few and far in between. So yes, this is something I do agree with. You should avoid officers, working 24 hours straight. That's just crazy. And something else about the staffing level. So we have here this 30%, which basically says that if staffing levels are at 30% or above, that's when the circuit breaker staffing metric will go into effect. So that is the threshold. That's ring the alarm. We have an issue if the vacancies are 30% or higher. So let's go into A through E. Facility will close post in order to address the shortfall if still not sufficient staffing then. So this is saying that they will close specific posts in order to address the shortfall. What exactly those posts are, I can just take a guess. I'm not too familiar, but we'll continue. Facility will suspend general population programming if still not sufficient staffing then. Facility will suspend HALT Act provisions contained within Correctional Law Section 137, pursuant to which the Commissioner has operational discretion, and specifically to the programming for only the days that meet the specific criteria. So going back to B and C, because B is a very important one. This is basically saying that if the circuit breaker staffing metric is followed, staffing levels are at 30% or higher, that general population programming is going to be suspended. I'm assuming that's stuff like education for incarcerated individuals, recreation and stuff of that nature. If anyone has a definition or if they fully understand what is meant by general population program, do me a favor, put that in the comments below. I'd love to hear that. Also, if you haven't already, we have about 14, 15 people on the stream. Please hit the like button to help with the algorithm. That would be greatly appreciated. Now we're on subsection D here. The circuit breaker provision will not apply to other elements of the HALT Act. E, the Commissioner of DOCCS retains the discretion to determine other high impact days. So this is interesting because this is saying that the Daniel Marchicello will have the ability at his discretion to determine what is considered another high impact day. We're going into the section that addresses the HALT committee. So this is something new that's going to be instituted. The parties agreed to establish a committee comprised of representatives of NYSCOPBA and DOCCS and other parties as set forth herein. The committee will begin its work immediately after the signing of this MOA and within 60 days of the date of this MOA, present agreed upon recommendations to the New York State legislature regarding changes to the Humane Alternatives to Long-Term HALT Solitary Confinement Act. Hold on, I need a swig of coffee. So this is something new. So now there's going to be a HALT committee that will be formed. Representatives of DOCCS, representatives of NYSCOPBA are going to be a part of the committee, and their primary objective is to give recommendations to the state legislator regarding the HALT Act. Continuing on with the memorandum, the committee will focus on areas that address the safety of staff and incarcerated individuals, to include but not limited to keep lock, assaults on staff, and assaults on incarcerated individuals. How about assaults on incarcerated individuals from staff? I don't see that as a part of this memorandum of understanding, but I digress. The committee will establish a minimum number of meetings to be held. The committee will be made up of as follows. One, NYSCOPBA will present one representative from each facility and then identify one of the representatives from each hub region to participate. Excuse me. Two, other state unions, Council 82, CSEA, and PEF, I believe that's Professional Employees Federation, shall be offered the opportunity to have a representative on the committee. So these are other state unions that operate in correctional facilities in within the New York State DOCCS system. Three, DOCCS will appoint as many state agency representatives as necessary to carry out the objectives of the committee. Okay, so that section specifically focused on the HALT Act. We're seeing a committee formed. We're seeing the circuit breaker staffing metric. And let's move on, because we've heard about overtime. Let me move on to a bigger view here. So we had correctional officers all throughout I believe it's been 18 days since the strike began, saying, this is not about money. It's not about money. It's about the safety, 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 safety. So let's see how financially correctional officers are going to be benefiting from this memorandum of understanding. Changes to overtime. The joint goal is to minimize and work towards eliminating anyone working 24-hour mandatory overtime. The parties agree to the following points to aid in this goal. Weekend voluntary overtime differential. So whenever you have a differential, it basically means that because you're working on a shift, you're working on a day or a holiday that is least desirable, there is an additional bump to that hourly rate to make it attractive for people to actually work. Also, this serves as a financial disincentive for the employer to avoid having people do these shifts, because then you have to pay more and that impacts your budget. So let's continue on. Weekend voluntary overtime differential. Any correction officer or sergeant who volunteers and works overtime on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday will receive a pay differential of $100 per shift worked on such day. Okay. DOCCS agrees that it will DOCCS agrees that it will maintain 12-hour shifts for correction officers and correction sergeants until it determines that each facility has returned to pre-strike staffing levels. When a facility returns to pre-strike staffing levels, DOCCS will return employees to their shifts, squads prior to the strike. Each facility superintendent will take measures to the best of their ability to honor an employee's regularly scheduled day off. Committee on Plot Plan Efficiency. The parties jointly agreed to establish a committee to analyze each facility's staffing and operational inefficiencies with the goal of providing more relief to existing staff. An independent staffing specialist shall be retained to conduct this analysis. As part of the review, the independent specialist, along with the committee, will review all post orders for potential consolidation or elimination, realignment of non security specific tasks, and conduct a review of both 8-hour and 12-hour staffing plans in order to provide more relief to existing staff. The parties will also review the annual leave day formula, vacation bid reposting practice, and incidental time as part of this committee. The commissioner retains all final authority on staffing decisions, and both parties retain their rights with respect to changes to terms and conditions of employment. So this is going to be another committee that's going to be established to look at the plot plan. I guess what the plot plan is the the framework for staffing. And let's move on to the next provision of this memorandum of understanding. So this was something else that we saw striking officers speak about while they were on camera. They were protesting legal mail and transportation security administration screening. A, DOCCS shall investigate and pursue a contract with a qualified vendor to provide equipment and/or services for the screening of all incarcerated individual legal mail in an effort to further curtail the introduction of drugs into correctional facilities. Such screening shall not include in any form the review of the communications within legal mail. Representatives, let me just stop it there. So just understand this. So basically, what DOCCS is saying is that they're going to investigate, they're going to pursue a contract with a third party vendor to provide services and screening of legal mail so that this does not fall on so that this is not the responsibility of correction officers. Subsection B, representatives from NYSCOPBA shall be considered a stakeholder so as to provide meaningful feedback in committee forum to DOCCS once potential vendors are established. The parties will continue discussions on transportation security administration screening services. So again, this is a small provision, and this is basically saying that a third party they will investigate, pursue a contract with a third party vendor to come in and do the legal mail screening. Now this addresses members on approved leave. The parties agree to continue to resolve any outstanding issues involving members on pre-approved leave for FEMLA, workers' compensation, paid parental leave, long-term sick, bereavement, sick leave at half pay, etc., but not vacation and personal leave, who were ordered to prematurely return to work during the strike. I'm going to minimize that for a quick second. So just understand this. And you have correction officers and correction officers, the advocates for them, who were, yelling to the high heavens because many were being forced to come back to work while they were on family and medical leave. So, for those of you who don't know, my background is human resources. Family Medical Leave Act is a federal act that says that employees have up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave to care for their own medical condition, the medical condition of a loved one or immediate family member, and you're able to take family medical leave when you adopt a child or give birth to a child for bonding. So New York State DOCCS, in all of their wisdom and glory, said we don't care if you are on family medical leave, you have to come back to work, which for me is illegal. You cannot do that as an employer. So why does the state feel that they can do that to correction officers is really beyond me. So again, I'm not a correctional officer advocate, but I am an advocate for truth, and I have to call out wrongdoing. So to be a correction officer and to be told that you have to come back, even though you're medically you're out, you're suffering with something. That makes no sense to me, and it goes to the lack of humanity of DOCCS. So, in a way, this doesn't surprise me. Let's go back to the article. I'm sorry, back to the memorandum. Strike-related discipline and other actions. DOCCS shall not issue notices of discipline under the collective bargaining agreement for an employee who engaged in the strike, so long as the employee returned to work by the deadline and in accordance of Section 12 of the MOA. So for those employees who return to work by the deadline, which I believe is today, the deadline was 1 minute ago. It's 6:46 a.m. right now. There will be no discipline for those correction officers who return to work as of now. Subsection B. This does not apply to employees who engage in criminal illegal activities separate and distinct from the accusation of strike participation. For example, employees who engage in vandalism or violence will be issued notices of discipline for such misconduct. So that kind of surprises me because you have correction officers that have beaten the crap out of incarcerated individuals and they've suffered no discipline. So now they're saying they want to give discipline if they vandalized property. So that piece for me is just a little laughable. Subsection C. DOCCS will also rescind probationary terminations issued to striking employees and reinstate any employee who resigned or was deemed resigned under Article 14.10 as a result of the strike upon that employee's request when they return to work. I'll pause it really quickly. So when this is making reference to Article 14-10, I believe this is referring to the NYSCOPBA collective bargaining agreement. Let's continue with the memorandum. If these individuals do not comply with Section 12 at any time, they will be immediately deemed resigned. The employee shall have the opportunity to submit evidence of compliance with Section 12 of this agreement within 48 hours of notice of noncompliance from the employer. D. DOCCS will take the necessary steps to adjourn Taylor law contempt proceedings against individual employees who return to work by the deadline and as set forth in Section 12 of this MOA. Once such individuals have returned to work, DOCCS will take the necessary steps to terminate contempt proceedings against those individuals. So for those of you who don't know, DOCCS had begun to institute proceedings of contempt to those correction officers who were striking. So this is basically saying, if you comply and go back to work, we will adjourn. We will not pursue these contempt charges that were brought out against you. Now let's go to subsection E, health insurance. The state will reinstate effective immediately and back to the first date of absence the health insurance of any employee who had their health insurance terminated, so long as the employee pays the COBRA rate for such coverage for the period of termination, and so long as the employee returns to work by the deadline and as set forth in Section 12 of this MOA. However, an employee does not have to elect to pay such rate if they elect not to have health insurance restored to such date. NYSCOPBA must withdraw the health insurance litigation without prejudice. So it seems NYSCOPBA had put forth litigation in terms of the withdrawal of health insurance. Also, this is basically saying that health insurance is going to be reinstated to those employees as long as they return to work as of now. The provisions of this section do not include any Taylor law deductions pursuant to Civil Service Law 210 for any employee who engaged in the strike. Okay, so now we're jumping to another section, but just let me go back quickly and just say, so to summarize this section, any striking employees who return to work will not face any disciplinary actions. Health insurance is going to be reinstated, which I know is a concern for many correctional officers. There is actually a correction officer advocate I believe his name is Vinny Blasio. He has a podcast on YouTube called I believe it's called Working in Hell podcast. So he gave the example of a correction officer who had to had well had they had a major surgery canceled because the health insurance was canceled. So he had a major health condition. His surgery was canceled. So can you imagine that? You have a valid health concern, health condition, and you have your health insurance terminated. That's crazy for me from an HR point of view. So let's go to this section. This discusses the National Guard. The National Guard will remain in a support posture and begin to draw down as staff return to work. The general support and drawdown will remain under the governor's discretion. National Guard that remain in place will be used to help prevent an employee from being mandated to work a 24-hour overtime shift. So what this is saying here is that the National Guard is going to remain. Eventually, they're going to be drawn down, and they will be used to prevent correction officers working a 24-hour shift. So that's actually a good thing to avoid fatigue, to avoid this crazy overtime. They'll be using the National Guard. People have had a lot of critiques about the National Guard. What training do they have to be able to work in a correctional facility? Obviously, having a National Guard presence is simply a band-aid. That's a band-aid to a bad situation. Let's go back to the memorandum. These parties confirm that the state has already rescinded the 7030 memorandum dated February 10th, 2025, as indicated in the February 2025 memorandum. So there was a big controversy with Daniel Marchicello and correctional officer staff. This is another big point of contention with correction officers. This memo that came from Daniel Marchicello saying that this is going to be the new norm, the staffing levels of 70/30. So that memo is rescinded, and Daniel Marchicello is forced to take that back. Continuing on with the memorandum, um, continuation of 2.5 overtime. So for anyone who doesn't know, overtime is 1.5 times your rate of pay. This is a continuation of 2.5 times overtime. The state will continue the 2.5 overtime rate for all overtime worked for 30 days from the date of this MOA. So the 2.5 overtime rate, I believe this was established sometime during the strike. And so this is saying that this is going to continue. The 2.5 overtime rate will not apply to any individual who does not return to work by 6:45 a.m. on March 9th, if and when they subsequently return to work. However, the state is entitled to claw back the difference between the normal overtime rate and the 2.5 overtime rate for any employee who received the 2.5 overtime rate and subsequently goes out on strike. The employees shall have the opportunity to submit evidence of compliance with Section 12 of this agreement within 48 hours of notice of noncompliance from the employer. We have a quick comment here from Chuck. Chuck says the National Guard are actually good to the prisoners. Continuing on with the memorandum, the state agrees that the Department of Civil Service complete its analysis of the union's previously submitted reallocation request to increase the salary grade of a correction officer from SG 14 to SG 17 and correction sergeant from SG 17 to SG 20 within 2 months from the date of this award. So not only not only not only does overtime continue on with this 2.5 rate, it's also we have a salary grade increase for these correction officers and sergeants. So they are financially benefiting from this. Let's continue on. The parties also agree to implement a referral bonus program whereby any staff that refers a non-DOCCS employee to become a correction officer or correction officer trainee will receive a $1,500 referral bonus upon their graduation of the academy and completion of on-the-job training, and a second $1,500 referral bonus upon their completion of the 52-week probationary period. So this is basically saying that there's going to be referral bonuses that will be implemented to help with retention. Um, the first referral bonus is 1,500 once somebody completes the academy. Excuse me, and then the second referral bonus is given out once the person completes their probationary period, which is 52 weeks. The parties agreed to meet and discuss the definitions of assault for tracking assaults on staff. Now, for those of you who don't know, I truly believe that you need to research both sides of an issue. Let me make myself bigger for this one. So I truly believe that you have to research both sides of the issue. And in order to understand someone else's point of view, you should be reading their articles. What are they publishing? You should be listening to their podcasts, to their interviews, reading their white papers. So this is something that I became knowledgeable on, or have some information about by watching Vinny Blasio, who's a correction officer advocate, and he spoke about the assaults for tracking assaults on staff. And basically, I believe so Vinny Blasio, if you're out there and you're watching this, or someone who knows you's watching this, I'm going to paraphrase what I believe you said. So I believe what Vinny Blasio said was that the definitions of what's a serious assault, what's like a low level of assault, is laughable, and the way docs puts out their information, they had a very uh, very low threshold. I'm sorry, a very high threshold of what like a high assault is. So what he was saying is that their numbers are skewed, and Doc's numbers doesn't really show you the amount of assaults that are taking place on correction officers, because their definitions are laughable and they have to be changed. So this memorandum here speaks about changing the definitions of what those assaults mean so that it could be more accurate. Let me jump back to the article now. Just a couple comments. We got one from Jason Scott. So-called law enforcement are the epitome of evil. I do believe evil exists in this world. What happened to what happened to Messiah Nantry, what happened to Robert Brooks, what happened to Christopher Keeles is evil. Another comment. They get all of this because their colleagues murdered and tortured somebody. Yeah, for me, the strike has been a big distraction. I hate even having to discuss this, but I'm going to discuss this because you guys want to know. That's why I'm here. If not, I would not be focusing on correctional officer strikes. Okay, let's go back to this memorandum. Uh, okay, 12, 85% of the pre-strike fill level of employees, those left to resign since the start of the strike, need to return to work and continue to work in order for the provisions of this MOA to be operational as follows. On or before 6:45 a.m. March 10th, 2025 for all employees. So I mentioned that I hate covering the strike, but I will so in the very least, I will provide you with a post on my YouTube that says whether this 85% pre-strike level has been met. I will share that with you. So maybe I'll put a comment in this live stream later on. I will go over that. Um, Okay. Let me just go to Vicky has a comment. Let's pull up Vicky's comments. She said, Fred, you need more information on this. An incarcerated individual can touch a CO accidentally and get charged with assault. No, I totally hear you. I see you. I don't see you, but I hear you. I understand what the definitions are, and how incarcerated individuals have been charged with assaults on COs, and that's not been the case. We know solitary confinement is not being used appropriately. It's being abused. So yeah, Vicky, I totally hear you and see you. Going back to the memorandum, the parties hereby rescind their consent for the issuance of the February 25th, 2025 consent award issued by mediator Scheinman. So I'm assuming mediator Scheinman was the mediator that they used. There was a previous consent award, and this is being rescinded. The parties agreed to refer all disputes over the application and interpretation of this MOA to Jeffrey M. Shelnick, the duly appointed master arbitrator, pursuant to Article 7 of the collective bargaining agreement, who shall have the authority to hear, decide, and resolve disputes regarding the MOA as part of the contractual ADR process. And this is signed by Daniel F. Marticello III, Commissioner, Department of Corrections. You have Michael Bolforte, Director of the Office of Employee Relations. Basically, this is the state agency that handles unions and stuff of that nature. And then you have Chris Summers, who is the president of NYSCOPBA. So we spent the last 45 minutes going over this entire memorandum of understanding. I hope you have a good sense of what this is. I do have a few minutes before I close. I'm going to put the link in the description in the chat here. If anybody wants to, connect and come online, pretty much the only, requirement I have is that you share your camera, you show your face, you have no loud music in the background, and I have some time to have a conversation. If somebody wants to discuss this, I'm more than open to having a conversation about this. So I'm going to remove this collective, I'm sorry, not this collective bargaining agreement, this memorandum of understanding here. Okay. So here are my final thoughts on this. Okay. So my final thoughts on this is that I truly don't like discussing the strike. Excuse me. I don't like discussing this, this agreement, this memorandum. I think this is necessary for you guys to be aware of, to know about. People have asked me to go over this. I'm still very much disappointed that the level of media coverage of what's happening with those who are incarcerated, the beatings, the the murders, the cover-ups are not being covered, are not being covered. And that bothers me tremendously. It really does. I think, basically everyone here is needed to continue to spread the word and, spread the word, share videos. It doesn't have to be mine. There are a bunch of other other YouTubers that are covering this. Feel free to share their information. Feel free to share their content. On a positive note, I know NBC4 has covered the death of Messiah Nantry. Also, last night I posted a tweet. I'm sorry, I posted a post she did on X. So Sarah Wallace is looking to speak to the family members of incarcerated individuals who have suffered abuse. So check out my community tab and check out the post to see to check out her email. And if you have someone that's dealing with abuse now, behind bars, send her an email. Maybe she might be able to get you some coverage. So there are a couple other comments here that I'll go into, and then we'll move on. We have Chuck saying, usually when there is attack on staff, it is because the CEOs have pushed the inmates to the limit. Most inmates don't want problems with CEOs. I believe you 1,000%. Vicky says, facts, Chuck. Okay. Okay. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone who came today. I think we had about 14, 15 people. If you found value, please join the channel. The memberships are less than the price of a cup of Starbucks coffee. If not, no worries. Please like the video, like the live stream, share it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. My goal is to give you honest and direct feedback and go deeper than what the mainstream media is telling you. Take care, God bless, and see you next time.